A massive infantry support vehicle that can destroy well-fortified structures or buildings was the idea behind the creation of the Sturmtiger, the German assault weapon. Stocked with a 380mm rocket launcher, 70 tons of armor, rails, and an engine, the Sturmtiger ruled the war ground. It was inspired by the Tiger I series of heavy tanks, with some of the hull armor increased for added protection and the combat compartment expanded to accept the considerably bigger diameter ammunition that it would fire. Because of this tank's greater weight, employing the Tiger I chassis and drivetrain resulted in reduced mobility and higher fuel consumption. The Sturmtiger's added weight negatively impacted the performance of the Tiger I suspension on the battlefield. The Sturmtiger was most notable for its main big cannon, which could fire a 380mm rocket-propelled shell. The unstoppable giant was resistant to practically all conventional weapons on the battlefield due to armor plates as thick as 150mm and shooting projectiles weighing more than 800 pounds. German engineers, however, battled to deploy the motorized cannon before it was too late, actively racing the force of the Allied attack on all fronts. When it eventually got to the front lines, its skills were remarkable, putting 3 U.S. Sherman tanks out of commission and even destroying whole blocks of concrete. By the time the Sturmtiger exploded onto the scene in the last months of the war, Germany had largely abandoned the offensive and was engaged in a defensive battle. However, during the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, the German troops readily realized that this urban setting was ideal for the Sturmtiger. The prototype saw virtually daily battles in the city starting in August and effectively pummeling fortified positions. More Company 1000 Sturmtigers were sent from Hungary to Warsaw in preparation for the war. Due to the Sturmtiger's overwhelming firepower, many buildings in Warsaw had been leveled, and the Polish fighter was unable to defeat the strongly armored vehicle. The Sturmtiger would go on to see greater battle in greater numbers in the last Wehrmacht operations to protect Germany after playing a critical part in the Warsaw Uprising. In order to field these animals, the army set up 3 units, including the prototype. 4 of the new construction Sturmtigers were distributed to the east of the designated assault mortar companies 1000, 1001, and 1002, with Company 1000 getting the prototype. Hitler himself gave the order to build 5 more, most likely as a result of the overwhelmingly enthusiastic response he had gotten. By the year's end, the repair facilities had finished them, just in time for the Ardennes offensive. German High Command ordered both companies of Sturmtigers to the region as the Americans attempted to force their way across the bridge at Remagen. One Sturmtiger from Company 1001 claimed to have shot a rocket into a town where American Sherman tanks were waiting. More than one Sherman tank is alleged to have been killed in that raid. Company 1001 quickly transported the remaining cars over the river and fired the rest of its ammo to halt the American advance following this alleged attack. When their ammunition ran out, the crews gave up. Its main cannon was originally intended to be a naval depth charge launcher that had been converted for use as land artillery. A 2-stage rocket propellant system was used to launch the payload. The first smaller charge ejected the projectile only far enough to clear the barrel. The massive 800-pound shell would then be launched across lengths of up to 4 miles by an even stronger solid fuel charge. The outcome was a deadly solution that could even breach the enemy's most heavily fortified military defenses. In reality, the Sturmtiger's destructive rounds could reach up to 8 feet of reinforced concrete, making it nearly difficult for opposing opposition to recover after being hit. 2 crew members would balance the rounds on the ground as they loaded the truck, and the crane operator would place a claw around the round's center mass, which was identified by a white stripe. The round would be winched upward and lowered into the superstructure through a hole in the ceiling once the claw was fastened. The crew delivered the rounds to the racks on either side of the Sturmtiger once inside, and the Sturmtiger's sheer destruction came at a significant cost, which had to be taken into account in tactical evaluations. With the ability to carry one in the feed cradle and another in the barrel, a total of 12 rounds could be stored, making the load a total of 14 rockets. This was one of the limitations of the motorized cannon, which required fitting 1 shell within the breech. The trucks would often carry only 13 rounds into battle, thus each shot had to be very meticulously prepared in advance to ensure a quality result. A skilled crew's handling of the painful procedure took around 10 minutes. And because of this, the cannon was unable to fire consecutive shots. Instead, it would frequently fire once before shifting positions or using a different strategy before shooting again. Additionally, the Sturmtiger was forced to flee after every shot due to the great danger of being discovered. The 2-charge detonation produced a noticeable trail of fire, smoke, and gases that could be seen for a considerable distance. However, the Sturmtiger's handling of the gases produced during the first combustion made the issue worse. These gases could not be discharged into the crew compartment when the initial charge is activated within the barrel, since doing so would poison the operators inside of the vehicle. It was also not possible to contain the fumes inside the short barrel until it was safe to do so, due to the intense pressure and potential for explosion. The 380mm mortar on the Sturmtiger features a unique configuration of tubes surrounding its barrel. These were included to vent the rocket-propelled projectile's gases. Without these openings, the mortar would have been destroyed by the pressure from the missiles. It was made sure that the pressure within the cannon would never be too high by turning the gases generated by the first detonation back into the barrel and releasing them via those smaller apertures. However, the second charge detonation and quick release of gases created a magnificent explosion of light, fire, and smoke, making the firing Sturmtiger considerably easier to find than other artillery options. As a result, it became customary for the operators of the Sturmtigers to shift to a safer location after firing a round. This tank was an exceptionally hardened armored vehicle that had a powerful firepower capability despite its operational flaws. The Sturmtiger was built with a casemate-style exterior and a sloping front glacis plate, similar to many tank hunter hull designs at the time, so that most enemy rounds would be deflected on impact rather than piercing the armor. The 150mm thick reinforced plates put on the front of the vehicle, however, would be nearly hard to puncture, even if the bullet were to succeed in hitting it at the right angle. The 100mm frontal armor plate on the Tiger 1 was greatly improved by this design. Depending on the vulnerability of the vehicle's components that needed to be defended and the possibility that an enemy attack would occur there, the armor thickness throughout the remainder of the vehicle varied from 60 to 100mm. The crew of the vehicle could also defend themselves with the aid of the MG-34 machine gun located at the front of the unit if any infantry soldiers dared to approach the self-propelled gun to lay explosives or damage the rails. The commander, the driver, the gunner, and the loader made up this crew. The radio man's and the anti-infantry frontal machine gun operator's duties were given to the loader, who was not always necessary to load rounds. Its inefficiency as a defensive weapon was mostly due to its weight and its poor precision. Nevertheless, German forces sent out 7 Sturmtigers to aid in the defense during the struggle for the bridge at Remagen. The Sturmtigers, however, were unable to blow up the bridge due to their poor cannon accuracy, which made it impossible for them to complete their mission. Despite failing, one of the troops is praised for pulling off a remarkable achievement during this bloody conflict. The destiny of Company 1002 is comparable. After relocating from the Remagen bridgehead, it became entangled in the Ruhr pocket. It fought for many weeks before firing its final rounds on April 16th of 1945 toward advancing American tanks. Shortly after, it capitulated in fine shape. At the end of the day, the idea of the weapon was outstanding, and it had tremendous promise as a destructive mobile platform for offensive operations. It may have changed the game for the Wehrmacht based on its limited combat experience, but did happen to arrive too late. So what do you think about this German Panzer? Why'd I say it like that? I don't know, because it really doesn't matter how I end a video, because everyone's already clicked off by now. Bye!